15 African countries that failed in 2024. In 2024, several African countries faced significant setbacks, grappling with challenges that hindered their development and progress. Nations like Niger, Chad, and South Sudan struggled due to ongoing conflicts, political instability, and economic mismanagement. Additionally, the lingering impacts of climate change and health crises exacerbated food insecurity and poverty. These factors, coupled with inadequate infrastructure and limited access to education, have created a perfect storm of underperformance. Despite rich resources and potential, these countries find themselves at a crossroads, highlighting the urgent need for strategic interventions and international support to foster sustainable growth and stability. These countries saw their economies crumble, currency devalued, poverty increased, and crisis heightened. Simply put, they failed to live up to expectation in 2024. Because we dive into the list, please subscribe to the channel. 15. Nigeria, HDI, 0.510. Nigeria, once heralded as the giant of Africa, boasted the continent's largest economy, fueled by its vast oil reserves and a youthful population. However, years of mismanagement, corruption, and political instability have led to a dramatic decline, bringing Nigeria to 4th place in economic rankings behind South Africa, Egypt, and Ethiopia. The devaluation of the naira has compounded economic woes, making imports more expensive and eroding purchasing power, which has resulted in skyrocketing inflation. The increase in poverty rates has been alarming, with over 40% of the population living below the poverty line. Many Nigerians face daily struggles for basic necessities, as unemployment continues to rise. Insecurity has further destabilized the nation, with violent conflicts from Boko Haram, insurgents in the northeast, banditry in the northwest, and separatist movements in the southeast, creating a pervasive climate of fear. These issues have hampered economic activities and deterred foreign investment, leading to a vicious cycle of decline. As Nigeria grapples with these multifaceted challenges, the hope for revitalization rests on comprehensive reforms, improved governance, and renewed commitment to addressing the root causes of its crises. 14. Malawi, HDI, 0.508. In 2024, Malawi faced significant struggles, grappling with rising poverty rates that affected nearly 70% of its population. Economic challenges were exacerbated by high inflation and food insecurity, stemming from climate change impacts and poor agricultural yields. Corruption remained a persistent issue, undermining governance and diverting resources away from essential services. The health sector also struggled, with inadequate funding and infrastructure hindering access to healthcare. Political instability and public protests over economic mismanagement further complicated the situation. Additionally, a lack of foreign investment and limited job opportunities stifled economic growth. These combined factors have left Malawi at a critical juncture, necessitating urgent reforms and international support to foster sustainable development and improve living conditions for its citizens. 13. Liberia, HDI, 0.488. Liberia continues to face profound challenges, struggling with extreme poverty that affects nearly 50% of its population. The country is still recovering from the devastating civil wars that ended in 2003, which left infrastructure in ruins and hindered economic development. Despite efforts to rebuild, high unemployment rates and limited access to basic services like healthcare and education persist. The economy remains fragile, heavily reliant on agriculture and natural resources, yet vulnerable to global market fluctuations. Corruption and mismanagement further undermine progress, eroding public trust and stalling foreign investment. Additionally, the impacts of climate change have exacerbated food insecurity, leaving many families without stable sources of nutrition. As Liberia strives to bounce back, it requires urgent international support, effective governance, and strategic investment in infrastructure and human capital to create sustainable pathways for growth and improve the living conditions of its citizens. 12th. Madagascar, HDI, 0.487. Madagascar continues to grapple with severe underdevelopment, stemming from a combination of political instability, environmental challenges, and economic vulnerability. Despite its rich biodiversity and natural resources, the country has a weak economy primarily reliant on agriculture, which employs about 70% of the population. Climate change has severely impacted agricultural productivity, leading to food insecurity and heightened poverty rates. In 2024, Madagascar faced significant hurdles, including inadequate infrastructure, limited access to education and healthcare, and rampant corruption. These issues have stifled foreign investment and hindered economic growth. As a result, many Malagasy people live on less than $2 a day. Efforts for recovery are hampered by a lack of resources and ongoing political turmoil, making it imperative for Madagascar to pursue comprehensive reforms and sustainable development strategies to improve the living conditions of its citizens. 11th. Guinea-Bissau, HDI, 0.483. Guinea-Bissau remains entrenched in underdevelopment, facing significant economic challenges that hinder its progress. Despite its rich natural resources, including cashews and fisheries, the country's economy is fragile and heavily reliant on agriculture, which is vulnerable to climate fluctuations. In 2024, Guinea-Bissau struggled with high unemployment rates and widespread poverty, with over 60% of the population living below the poverty line. Political instability and corruption have further exacerbated economic woes, deterring foreign investment and stalling essential reforms. The lack of infrastructure, including roads and healthcare facilities, hampers access to jobs and services. Additionally, ongoing conflicts and drug trafficking issues complicate efforts for stability and development. Addressing these challenges is crucial for Guinea-Bissau to foster sustainable growth and improve the living conditions of its citizens. 10th DRC, HDI, 0.481. Despite being one of the richest countries in natural resources, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, DRC, continues to struggle with pervasive poverty. The nation is endowed with vast mineral wealth, including cobalt, diamonds, and gold, yet over 60% of its population lives on less than $2 a day. This paradox arises from years of political instability, corruption, and mismanagement, which have diverted resource revenues away from public services. Armed conflicts and violence in resource-rich regions exacerbate the situation, displacing communities and hindering economic development. Additionally, inadequate infrastructure and a lack of investment in health and education further entrench poverty. To break this cycle, the DRC requires effective governance, sustainable resource management, and international support to ensure that its wealth benefits all citizens. 9th Guinea, HDI, 0.472. Guinea continues to struggle with significant underdevelopment, marked by a weak economy heavily reliant on mining, particularly bauxite, but facing challenges in diversifying its economic base. In 2024, the country grappled with high unemployment rates and pervasive poverty, with nearly 55% of the population living below the poverty line. Political instability and recent coups have further hindered progress, eroding investor confidence and stalling vital reforms. Corruption and inadequate infrastructure exacerbate challenges in healthcare and education, limiting access to essential services. Additionally, Guinea's agricultural sector, which employs a large portion of the population, suffers from poor infrastructure and climate vulnerabilities. The combination of these factors has created a cycle of stagnation, making it imperative for Guinea to implement comprehensive strategies for sustainable development and economic resilience to improve the living conditions of its citizens. 8. Mozambique, HDI, 0.462. In 2024, Mozambique faced significant challenges, revealing critical areas of failure in governance, economic stability, and social development. The country continued to grapple with the aftermath of a hidden debt scandal, which compromised public trust and diverted funds from essential services. Political instability and ongoing conflict in the northern provinces exacerbated humanitarian crises, displacing thousands and hindering development efforts. Economically, Mozambique struggled with high inflation and reliance on a narrow range of exports, particularly natural gas and agriculture, which left it vulnerable to global market fluctuations. Infrastructure deficits, especially in rural areas, limited access to education and healthcare. Additionally, widespread poverty and food insecurity persisted, affecting millions. These issues underscored the urgent need for effective governance, transparent economic management, and targeted investment in social services to foster sustainable development. 7. Sierra Leone, HDI, 0.458. In 2024, Sierra Leone continued to confront significant challenges that highlighted areas of failure in governance, economic development, and public health. Despite post-Civil War recovery, the country struggled with high poverty rates, with nearly 60% of the population living below the poverty line. Corruption remained a persistent issue, undermining public trust and diverting resources from critical services. Additionally, the economy remained fragile, heavily dependent on mining and agriculture, which left it vulnerable to global price fluctuations. Infrastructure deficits hindered access to education and healthcare, exacerbating social inequalities. The healthcare system, still recovering from the Ebola outbreak, faced ongoing challenges in service delivery and access. These issues underscored the urgent need for effective governance, economic diversification, and investment in social services to ensure sustainable development and improve living conditions for Sierra Leoneans. 6. Burkina Faso, HDI, 0.438. Burkina Faso continues to struggle with underdevelopment, marked by a weak economy and pervasive poverty. In 2024, the country faced significant challenges, including high unemployment rates and limited access to basic services, with more than 40% of the population living below the poverty line. The economy is heavily reliant on agriculture, particularly cotton, which is vulnerable to climate change and market fluctuations. Political instability, characterized by recent coups and ongoing security threats from extremist groups, has disrupted economic activities and deterred investment. Additionally, inadequate infrastructure, including poor roads and lack of healthcare facilities, hampers access to education and employment opportunities. These intertwined issues highlight the urgent need for effective governance, security improvements, and investment in sustainable development to break the cycle of poverty and underdevelopment in Burkina Faso. 5. Burundi, HDI, 0.420. Burundi remains one of the poorest countries in the world, grappling with severe underdevelopment and a fragile economy. In 2024, over 70% of the population lived below the poverty line, facing food insecurity and limited access to basic services such as healthcare and education. The economy is primarily agrarian, with subsistence farming dominating, making it vulnerable to climatic changes and market fluctuations. Political instability, stemming from a history of ethnic conflict and recent government repression, has deterred investment and hindered economic growth. High unemployment rates, particularly among youth, exacerbate social tensions. Additionally, inadequate infrastructure, including poor transport and energy systems, limits productivity and access to markets. These challenges underline the urgent need for stability, good governance, and investment in human capital to foster sustainable development in Burundi. 4. Chad, HDI, 0.394. Corruption was rampant, diverting vital resources away from essential services like healthcare and education, further entrenching poverty. Political instability and ongoing conflicts in various regions led to internal displacement and disrupted livelihoods. Additionally, climate change impacted agricultural productivity, threatening food security for millions. Infrastructure deficits, particularly in transportation and energy, stifled economic growth and access to markets. These intertwined issues underscored the urgent need for effective governance, anti-corruption measures, and sustainable development strategies to improve living conditions and foster resilience in Chad. 3. Niger, HDI, 0.389. Over 40% of the population lived below the poverty line, facing food insecurity and limited access to education and healthcare. The economy is predominantly agrarian, reliant on subsistence farming, making it vulnerable to climate shocks and desertification. Political instability, marked by coups and insecurity from extremist groups, disrupted economic activities and deterred foreign investment. High unemployment rates, particularly among youth, exacerbated social tensions. Furthermore, inadequate infrastructure, including poor transportation and energy systems, hampered economic growth and access to markets. These challenges highlight the critical need for effective governance, investment in education, and sustainable development initiatives to improve living conditions and foster economic resilience in Niger. 2. Central African Republic, HDI, 0.387. The Central African Republic, CAR, has remained one of the poorest countries in the world, grappling with extreme poverty and ongoing instability. Over 70% of the population lived below the poverty line, facing dire food insecurity and limited access to basic services such as healthcare and education. The country has been mired in conflict since 2013, with fighting among various armed groups severely disrupting daily life and economic activities. Despite a peace agreement, violence persisted, displacing thousands and hindering humanitarian efforts. Economic recovery has been sluggish, largely reliant on subsistence agriculture, which is vulnerable to climate variability. Corruption and weak governance further stymied progress, diverting crucial resources from development initiatives. In 2024, efforts to bounce back were hampered by inadequate infrastructure and a lack of investment. The CAR urgently needs sustained international support, effective governance, and initiatives to build resilience and promote sustainable development for its people. 1. Somalia, HDI, 0.380. In 2024, Somalia continued to face significant challenges related to underdevelopment and a weak economy. Prolonged conflict and instability have left over 70% of the population living below the poverty line, struggling with food insecurity and inadequate access to healthcare and education. The economy is primarily informal, heavily reliant on agriculture and livestock, which are vulnerable to climate shocks like droughts. Political instability, exacerbated by ongoing violence from militant groups, has deterred foreign investment and hindered economic growth. High unemployment rates, particularly among youth, contribute to social unrest and insecurity. Furthermore, inadequate infrastructure, including poor roads and limited access to electricity, stifles trade and development. These interconnected issues underscore the urgent need for peace, effective governance, and investment in sustainable development to improve living conditions in Somalia.